Sometimes they break what they can't own and expect the ruins to lie quietly at their feet. My name is Raymond Lowell, and I'm 38 years old. Each morning I wake in the house I fought to keep, make coffee, and take my dog Scout for a walk before heading to the Air Force Base where I've served for 15 years. When I walked through my own front door 2 days early from deployment, the laughter stopped. My wife Denise sat perched on our couch, surrounded by 4 men, Gavin, Dane, Trent, and Omar, whiskey bottles scattered across our coffee table. My shoulders tensed. I once believed our marriage was unbreakable, built on promises we'd both sworn to honor. The ring on her finger caught the light as she said those damning words. "You weren't supposed to be here." I didn't rage. I documented. Evidence doesn't lie, even when people do. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I'd spent 16 hours on flights, crossed 8 time zones, and caught an early transport home just to surprise her. 2 days ahead of schedule, I'd been picturing Denise's face lighting up when I walked through the door. Maybe she'd run into my arms like she used to when we were first married. 15 years in the Air Force teaches you to expect the unexpected, but nothing prepared me for this. I punched in the code to our front door, hefting my duffel bag higher on my shoulder as I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Unfamiliar cologne mixing with whiskey, then laughter. Male voices, loud and loose, coming from our living room. And then she said, the voice cut off mid-sentence. I stepped into my own home and froze. 4 men I'd never seen before were sprawled across my furniture like they owned the place. 2 empty whiskey bottles sat on the coffee table alongside half-filled glasses. And there was Denise, perched on the arm of our couch in a tight black dress I'd never seen before, her hand resting casually on the shoulder of a man wearing an expensive watch. No one jumped up. No one looked embarrassed. The room just went quiet, 5 pairs of eyes sizing me up. The man with the watch, Gavin, I'd later learn, just raised an eyebrow and took another sip from his glass. Beside him, a muscular guy with tattoos, Dane, smirked like I was interrupting their party. The largest man, Trent, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. The 4th, Omar, simply watched, expressionless. Denise's smile dropped the instant she saw me. Not surprise, not guilt, irritation. "You weren't supposed to be here," she said, the words landing like a slap. I felt a tightness in my chest, but years of military discipline kicked in. Without a word, I set my duffel down slowly and slipped my phone from my pocket. I swiped to the camera app and hit record, keeping it partially concealed in my hand. "Who are these men, Denise?" My voice came out calmer than I felt. She rolled her eyes. "Friends. We're just having some drinks. In our home. Without telling me you'd have company. If you were ever home, I wouldn't need friends," she shot back. The man with the watch, Gavin, leaned back, stretching his arm across the back of my couch. "Relax, man. We're just talking." "In my house?" I stepped forward. "Everyone needs to leave. Now." Dane chuckled. "You don't satisfy her schedule, soldier." "Air Force," I corrected, keeping my voice steady. "And I'm not your soldier." Denise's voice sharpened. "You're always gone, Raymond. You and your precious rules. I needed fun." "You needed my key code," I said, glancing at the keypad by the door that only she had access to besides me. "Who gave it to them?" "Don't act like you're a saint," she snapped. "You left me. I left to work, to pay for this roof. You chose this." I gestured at the scene before me, making sure my phone captured everything. "All of you, out. You're trespassing." Trent stood up, towering over the coffee table. "Maybe you should be the one to leave." I held my phone slightly higher, making sure the red recording light was visible. "I wouldn't try that." "Not with this recording evidence of you trespassing in my home?" Trent's eyes caught the light. He hesitated, then muttered, That's smart, before backing down. Gavin stood up first, buttoning his jacket with exaggerated slowness. Come on, guys. Let's give the happy couple some privacy. The four men filed past me, Dane giving me a mocking salute, Trent brushing my shoulder intentionally, Omar avoiding eye contact altogether. I stood my ground until the door closed behind them. Denise remained seated, her jaw set. Pack a bag, I told her. You can't kick me out, she said, standing up. This is my house, too. Then I'll call the police, I said. Let them sort out who stays. Her eyes flashed. Fine, I'll call them myself. I nodded, my phone still recording. Perfect. Let's get everything on the record. 2 police officers arrived within 20 minutes. A male and female, both with the weary expressions of people who'd seen this scenario too many times before. I met them at the door while Denise stayed in the living room, arms crossed. Makeup still perfect, despite everything. Officers, thank you for coming, I said, stepping aside to let them in. I'm Raymond Lowell. I just returned from deployment to find 4 strangers in my home. The female officer, Rodriguez, according to her nameplate, nodded. Your wife mentioned you had a disagreement about guests. They weren't guests, I corrected. I've never met these men before. They were given access to my home without my knowledge or permission while I was deployed. Denise's voice cut in from behind me. They're my friends, Raymond. Stop being dramatic. The male officer, Jenkins, pulled out a notepad. Ma'am, sir, let's get some details here. Mr. Lowell, you're saying these individuals didn't have permission to be in your home? That's correct, and I have video. I pulled up the recording on my phone and handed it to Officer Rodriguez. They watched in silence, exchanging glances at certain points. When it finished, Rodriguez handed the phone back. That's pretty clear. You asked them to leave, and you mentioned something about a keypad? Yes. Our front door has a keypad lock. Only Denise and I should have the code. Jenkins turned to Denise. Ma'am, did you provide access to these individuals? Denise rolled her eyes. Yes, I gave them the code. It's my house, too. And the names of these individuals? Jenkins asked. Gavin Marshall, Dane Whitfield, Trent Wallace, and Omar Delgado, Denise provided with a sigh. This is ridiculous. I hadn't even known their last names until that moment. The realization that she knew them well enough to provide that information immediately hit me like a punch to the gut. Rodriguez looked at me. Do you want to press charges for trespassing? I considered it briefly. Not at this time. But I would like trespass warnings issued and this incident documented. They took down the information, creating a report number. Jenkins explained they would issue official trespass warnings to the 4 men, meaning they could be arrested if they returned to our property. If you change your mind about pressing charges, or if there are any further incidents, don't hesitate to call, Rodriguez said, handing me a card with the report number. As they headed for the door, Denise gave me a disdainful smirk behind their backs, the kind that said this was far from over. After they left, Denise disappeared into the guest bedroom without a word, slamming the door behind her. I didn't follow. I needed space to think. I sat alone at our kitchen table until after midnight, replaying the video over and over. Each viewing revealed new details, how comfortable they all seemed in my home. The familiar way Gavin's hand had rested near Denise's thigh, the empty spot on the mantel where our wedding photo used to sit. I remembered the time I'd brought Denise breakfast in bed on our 5th anniversary. Pancakes with strawberries arranged in a heart. She'd smiled then, genuine and warm. When had that woman become the stranger who'd smirked at me tonight? The kitchen clock ticked past 2 a.m. when I finally went to bed. On the couch. Sleep came in fitful bursts, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask. Morning came with harsh sunlight and the ping of an email on my phone. I squinted at the screen, then sat bolt upright. The message was from my squadron commander, TSQT Lowell. Report to my office at 0900 regarding a personal matter. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from Major Santiago, who slid a document across his desk with a grim expression. "Raymond, we've received notification of an emergency protective order filed against you by your wife, Denise Lowell. She's claiming you displayed threatening behavior, and she fears for her safety." The paper swam before my eyes. Words like rage, intimidation, and history of aggressive behavior jumped out at me. "This is completely false, sir," I said, my voice tight. "I have video of the entire interaction." "I'd like to see that," he replied. "But in the meantime, I have to follow protocol. Your access to secure areas is temporarily suspended pending review. You'll be assigned to administrative duties until this is resolved." I nodded mechanically, understanding the procedure even as anger burned in my chest. "Yes, sir." Walking out of his office, the full reality hit me. In less than 24 hours, Denise had launched an attack on everything I'd built. My home was compromised. My unblemished 15-year military career was suddenly at risk. My personal record now had a flag that could follow me for years. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was war. The next morning, I parked outside a sleek 2-story building in the business district. The sign read, "Lee and Associates, Family Law." My hands were steady as I grabbed the folder containing my documentation, police report, video screenshots, and keypad access logs. "I need someone who won't flinch," I told the receptionist. "Someone who understands what's at stake." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Casey Lee. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back neatly, eyes that missed nothing. Her office was meticulously organized, a good sign. "Walk me through everything from the beginning," she said, pen poised over a yellow legal pad. I laid it all out chronologically, coming home early, the scene in my living room, recording the confrontation, the police report, and finally, Denise's protective order that threatened my career. Casey didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she nodded and set down her pen. "First, Raymond, know this. What happened to you was calculated. This isn't random. The timing of her filing, specifically when it would impact your military career, shows planning." "So what do?" I asked. "We build a wall of evidence so solid it crushes her false narrative." Casey tapped my folder. "You've already started, which puts you ahead. Most clients come to me emotional, with nothing documented." She outlined our approach on a whiteboard. "We need to establish a pattern of behavior on Denise's part. The video is excellent, but we need more. Bank statements showing unusual spending patterns during your deployment. Security footage. Witness statements." "I have access to our doorbell camera," I offered. "Perfect. Download everything from the past 6 months." She made a note. "I'm also bringing in Eddie Tran, a private investigator I work with, former police officer. Thorough." "Is that necessary?" I asked. "Absolutely. You mentioned a man named Gavin. If he's been at your house regularly, Eddie can document it. Patterns of visitation create a compelling counter-narrative to her claims." I remembered the way Gavin had lounged on my couch like he belonged there. "Do it." "One more thing," Casey said, her expression serious. "Throughout all of this, you must remain composed. No angry texts, no confrontations, no social media posts. Nothing that could support her portrayal of you as aggressive. Can you do that?" "I've been in combat zones. I can handle this." "Different kind of battlefield," she warned, "but the same discipline applies." 3 days later, Eddie Tran and I met in Casey's office. He was wiry, observant, with casual clothes that helped him blend into any neighborhood. "Got something interesting," he said, opening his laptop. I interviewed neighbors under the pretext of a community safety survey. Mr. Peterson, 3 doors down, has a security system covering the street. He played footage showing a black Audi parking in front of my house at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday during my deployment. The timestamp showed the car remained until 5:23 a.m. Wednesday. "That's Gavin's car," I confirmed, my stomach tightening. It was there overnight on 6 different occasions in the past month, Eddie said, always arriving after dark, leaving before dawn. Casey nodded. This directly contradicts Denise's claim that you're the threat. She's established a pattern of bringing men into the marital home during your absence. There's more, Eddie continued. I've documented Venmo transactions between your wife and Gavin Marshall. Small amounts, usually with emojis as descriptions. And I've traced hotel charges on your joint credit card to dates when, according to her social media, she was attending yoga retreats. The evidence was mounting, each piece another nail in the coffin of Denise's lies. A week later, Casey arranged a meeting between all parties and their attorneys. A chance to negotiate before court proceedings intensified. I sat across from Denise, our lawyers flanking us. We have a proposition, Casey began. A clean division of assets. Mr. Lowell keeps the house. Mrs. Lowell takes her personal vehicle and belongings. No alimony in either direction. I looked directly at Denise. You want a clean split? This is it. You get your car and your clothes. I keep the house. We both walk away. Denise laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that echoed in the conference room. After what I've been through? You'll be paying me for years. Her attorney, a pinch-faced man named Gregory, nodded. My client is entitled to significant spousal support, given the length of the marriage and the trauma she's experienced. I maintained eye contact with Denise, keeping my voice level. Then we do it my way. Full discovery. Every bank statement. Every text message. Every video. Every witness deposition. For the first time since this began, I saw uncertainty flicker across Denise's face. Her smirk faltered as I continued. Discovery goes both ways, Denise. Everything comes to light. Let me show you something else, Eddie said, sliding his laptop toward me. I traced the Venmo activity between your wife and Gavin Marshall. The screen showed a series of transactions over the past 4 months, during my deployment. Small amounts, usually between $50 and $200. Look at the notes, Eddie pointed. Each payment had emoji descriptions, wine glasses, cocktails, hearts, and several with just a winking face. The pattern was unmistakable. And here's where it gets interesting, Eddie continued, switching to a spreadsheet. I cross-referenced your joint credit card statements with her social media posts. On March 12th, she posted about attending a weekend yoga retreat with her girlfriends. I remembered the post. She'd texted me about it while I was overseas. That same weekend, there's a charge at the Lakeside Hotel. Room service, bar tab, spa services. 2 nights. Eddie highlighted the entries. Similar pattern on April 9th and 23rd. Always yoga retreats on Instagram. Always hotel charges. And the doorbell footage? Casey asked. Goldmine, Eddie replied. I've compiled clips showing Gavin entering the house using the keypad, not being let in, on 12 separate occasions, 4 times with other men, including the group you encountered when you returned. I sat there, absorbing it all. The betrayal was even more calculated than I'd initially thought. Has she tried contacting you directly? Casey asked me. 3 times. I didn't respond. I showed her my phone. 2 text messages claiming I'm overreacting, and 1 voicemail asking for time to talk this out. Perfect, Casey nodded approvingly. Your restraint builds our case. We need to demonstrate that you're reasonable while she's reckless. Over the next week, we compiled everything into organized packets. Police reports, my video from that first night, keypad access logs, doorbell footage, bank statements, and Eddie's findings. Casey made 2 copies, 1 for court, 1 for my command. Your hearing for the temporary orders is next Tuesday, she explained. But first, let's focus on clearing your name with the Air Force. My meeting with Colonel Reeves and Major Willis was set for Friday morning. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my service dress uniform, carrying a leather portfolio with our evidence packet. Technical Sergeant Lowell, Colonel Reeves began formally. You understand why we've suspended your access pending this review? Yes, sir. Protocol for domestic allegations. I respect the process. What can you tell us about these claims? Major Willis asked, referring to Denise's protective order application. I placed the portfolio on the desk. With respect, ma'am, sir, I'd like to present documented evidence, rather than just my word. They reviewed everything methodically. The unedited video from that night, the police report showing no arrests, but noting the trespass warnings, the doorbell footage showing patterns of men entering our home during my deployment. This contradicts Mrs. Lowell's statement significantly, Colonel Reeves observed. Yes, sir. She claimed I raged and threatened violence. The video shows I remained controlled and called the police myself. Major Willis examined the bank statements. These expenditures during your deployment, were you aware of them? No, ma'am. That's part of our ongoing civil case. By the end of the 90-minute meeting, their expressions had shifted from concern to understanding. Technical Sergeant Lowell, Colonel Reeves said, based on the evidence presented, we're reinstating your access provisionally, pending the outcome of the civilian proceedings. Report to duty Monday morning. Thank you, sir, Major Willis added. Your restraint is noted and appreciated, Sergeant. Continue to conduct yourself professionally. I left the building feeling lighter than I had in weeks. One hurdle cleared. Tuesday's court hearing was next. Casey and I arrived early, taking our seats at the plaintiff's table. Denise and her attorney entered minutes before the judge, barely acknowledging us. Judge Harmon, a stern woman in her 60s, wasted no time. We're here on a motion for temporary orders regarding exclusive possession of the marital home and protective measures. Denise's attorney presented first, painting me as an angry, controlling husband who'd threatened his client upon returning from deployment. When our turn came, Casey was methodical. Your Honor, rather than rely on characterizations, we'd like to show you what actually happened. She played my video, highlighting how I'd maintained composure despite finding strangers in my home. She presented the police report, the doorbell footage, and Eddie's findings about Gavin's overnight stays. Mrs. Lowell provided access to her paramour while her husband was deployed serving his country, Casey concluded. Now she seeks to remove him from his own home based on false claims. Judge Harmon reviewed everything carefully before looking up. The court finds the evidence compelling. Temporary exclusive possession of the marital residence is granted to Mr. Lowell. I exhaled slowly. Furthermore, she continued, Mrs. Lowell is ordered to cease introducing unrelated adult males into the residence and to provide a full accounting of joint financial assets within 7 days, particularly regarding the apparent withdrawals from savings. As we left the courtroom, I felt the first real hope since walking into my living room that night. My house was mine again. My job was secure. The truth was being heard. That evening, I sat on my front porch with Scout for the first time since coming home, without feeling like an intruder in my own space. The golden retriever's head rested on my knee, his eyes watching me with that simple, honest devotion that makes dogs better than most people. It's just us now, buddy, I said, scratching behind his ears. The neighborhood was quiet, regular Tuesday night stillness, with only the occasional car passing by. Fireflies had started to appear in the early summer evening, blinking like distant signal lights in the growing dusk. I sipped coffee from my Air Force mug, the one Denise had tried to pack when she collected her first round of belongings earlier that day. That's mine, I'd said simply, taking it from the box. She'd glared, but said nothing. Her attorney stood by, making sure everything followed the court order. No drama. Just the cold, procedural dismantling of a marriage I'd once believed would last forever. When I was deployed to Al Udeid the first time, I'd catch myself daydreaming about moments exactly like this, sitting on my own porch, Scout at my side, the safety of home wrapping around me like a shield. The reality felt hollower than the dream had been, but it was mine again. That counted for something. The next morning, I started the real cleanup. The living room couch had to go. the one where I'd found her perched like a queen among her court. I could still see the whiskey stains on the armrest, still smell the lingering cologne that didn't belong to me. I called a junk service and watched them haul it away, feeling lighter with each step they took toward their truck. Room by room, I reclaimed my space. I boxed up the decorative pillows Denise had insisted on, the scented candles that had always given me headaches, the framed photos of her family that had outnumbered mine 3-1. The master bedroom closet, now half empty, became a strange relief rather than a reminder of absence. Scout followed me from room to room, as if sensing that we were establishing new territory rules. When I finished, I treated us both to takeout from the barbecue place near base. The one Denise had always complained smelled too strongly of smoke. 2 small victories, I said, offering Scout a bite of brisket. By Friday morning, the house felt different. Emptier but cleaner somehow, like preparing a wound before it could heal properly. I was checking my email at the kitchen table when my phone rang with the bank's number on the caller ID. Mr. Lowell? This is Trevor Barnes from First Federal Credit Union. I'm calling about a transaction we've flagged in our system. What kind of transaction? I asked, already feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. A cashier's check was issued from your joint account with Denise Lowell for $18,400 last week. It was cashed at our downtown branch. The amount hit me first, almost our entire emergency fund. I didn't authorize that. Well, sir, we have the withdrawal slip with your signature on it. That's not possible. I was deployed until 2 weeks ago. The check was processed on the 14th, sir. The signature matches what we have on file. The 14th, 5 days before I came home. 5 days before I walked in on Denise and her friends. I need copies of everything, I said, my voice tight. That's not my signature. I want to see the withdrawal slip, the check, and the ID used. Sir, are you saying this was fraudulent? That's exactly what I'm saying. An hour later, I sat in Trevor Barnes's office, staring at the documents. The signature was close enough to fool someone who wasn't looking carefully. But certain letters slanted wrong. The pressure points were off. Whoever signed my name knew my handwriting, but couldn't perfectly replicate it. The security camera still showed Denise at the teller window, sunglasses pushed up on her head, smiling as she conducted the transaction. I'll need to file a fraud report, I said. Of course, Mr. Lowell. Given that this involves a joint account holder, you should know this may become complicated. Everything already is, I replied. I was halfway home when Casey called. Raymond, we have a problem. Gavin Marshall just filed a harassment complaint against you with the county prosecutor. The road seemed to tilt under my tires. What? He's claiming you threatened him in the Walmart parking lot 2 days ago, says you approached his car and said you'd make him regret ever stepping foot in your house, and that he wouldn't see what was coming. That's absurd. I was at the base all day Tuesday for reinstatement processing. I haven't seen him since that night. I believe you, but we need to get ahead of this. Can you come to my office? On my way. I hung up and gripped the steering wheel tighter. The money, now this, the momentary victory I'd felt was evaporating, replaced by the familiar weight of being under attack. Just when I thought I'd regained solid ground, it was shifting beneath my feet again. The steering wheel creaked under my grip as I pulled into the parking lot of Casey's law office. I sat there for a minute, engine off, trying to quiet the roar in my head. Denise had taken our savings, money I'd earned during sleepless nights in forward operating bases. She'd forged my name. And now Gavin was lying to drag me down further. In my younger days, this would have been enough to send me hunting for Gavin's address. But 16 years in the Air Force had taught me that rage makes you sloppy. And I couldn't afford sloppy. I checked my watch. I had exactly 40 minutes before I needed to be at Eddie Tran's office with the bank documents. I grabbed my folder and headed into Casey's building. We need to move fast, Casey said after I showed her the bank's documentation. This changes things. It escalates from just a divorce to criminal fraud. And it gives us leverage on the harassment claim. How do we handle both at once? She tapped her pen against her legal pad. We divide and conquer. I'll prepare the motion for sanctions in family court, plus a referral to the DA for the forgery. Meanwhile, Eddie needs to trace the money. Where did it go after she cashed the check? 3 hours later, Eddie's office smelled like old coffee and determination. He had 3 monitors set up, each displaying different footage. The bank's security footage was a good start, Eddie said, adjusting one screen to show Denise at the teller window. But I kept pulling threads. Here's where it gets interesting. He clicked to the next clip, an ATM camera at a gas station across town. Date stamp, 15 minutes after she'd left the bank. Is that? I leaned closer. Yep. Your wife depositing something at the ATM. He zoomed in. And if you look carefully, the image sharpened. Denise, still wearing sunglasses, the cashier's check partially visible as she fed it into the machine. Different account? Eddie nodded. A personal one. Only her name on it. He pulled up a third screen. And here she is 2 days later, withdrawing a chunk in cash. I watched the footage of Denise counting bills at another ATM. Why take it out in cash? That's what people do when they don't want transactions traced. Eddie pulled out a printout. But here's where she slipped up. She used Venmo the same day. The Venmo receipt showed a $2,200 payment to G. Marshall with a house emoji as the only description. Gavin, I said flatly. That's not all. Eddie handed me his tablet. I pulled their texts from her phone records. Took some doing, but we got them. My stomach turned as I scrolled through the messages. Denise. Signing his name was easy. Banker barely glanced at it. Gavin. Smart girl. What's next? Denise. Once the TRO sticks, he's off base and we own the house. Gavin. How long? Denise. Few weeks tops. He's too careful. We need to make him look dangerous, Gavin. Leave that to me. I handed the tablet back to Eddie, a cold clarity washing over me. This is the nail in their coffin, Eddie said. Proves intent, conspiracy, and directly connects to Gavin's false harassment claim. I want every screenshot, timestamp, and GPS ping you can get, I said. And I want it yesterday. Casey worked through the night. By morning, we had a 3-pronged attack. Criminal referral for forgery, motion for sanctions in the divorce, and a counter-complaint against Gavin for filing a false report. Every document backed by Eddie's evidence. The settlement conference is our moment, Casey said, as we prepped 2 days later. We'll lay it all out. No hiding, no bluffing, just hard evidence. If Denise is smart, she'll fold. And if she's not? Casey smiled thinly. Then the judge sees everything, and we push for maximum penalties. The conference room felt too small when we arrived. Denise and her attorney were already seated, her posture radiating defiance. She wouldn't look at me directly. Before we begin, her lawyer started, my client wants to address the harassment allegations. Actually, Casey interrupted, opening her briefcase, we have several matters to address first. I watched Denise's face as Casey methodically laid out the evidence on the polished table. First, the bank footage still of Denise with the cashier's check. Then the ATM images showing the deposit and withdrawal. Next, the Venmo receipt to Gavin. Denise's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure until Casey placed the text message screenshots in front of her. Her eyes widened at her own words on the page. Signing his name was easy, and he's too careful. We need to make him look dangerous. I leaned forward, catching Denise's gaze for the first time. The confident mask she'd worn since that night in our living room finally cracked. I saw a flicker of something behind her eyes, not remorse, but fear. The realization that her scheme was collapsing around her. Where's Gavin? I asked, my voice steady. Her lawyer glanced at the empty chair beside them. Mr. Marshall sends his regrets, he said stiffly. Of course he did. Rats always know when to abandon ship. Casey slid a thick folder across the table. This is our sanctions motion, she said, her voice cool and measured. I suggest you review it carefully." The mediator, a retired judge with silver hair and tired eyes, nodded. "Let's proceed systematically." The conference room felt like a vacuum chamber. No one fidgeted. No one checked phones. Just the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of paper. Denise sat rigid in her chair, her attorney whispering urgently in her ear. The empty chair beside them, where Gavin should have been, spoke volumes. I'd expected to feel rage sitting across from her, but instead found myself oddly detached, like I was watching someone else's divorce unfold. The woman across the table wasn't the person I'd married. Maybe she never had been. Casey opened with the financials. Exhibit A. Bank records showing a cashier's check for $1,800 drawn from the joint account on April 14th. She placed the document in the center of the table. The signature purports to be Mr. Lowell's, but as you can see from his actual signature samples, she laid down 3 comparison documents. It's clearly forged. Denise's attorney leaned forward. "My client denies any knowledge of Exhibit B," Casey continued, undeterred. ATM footage from First National on Cherry Street, showing Mrs. Lowell depositing this same check into her personal account 15 minutes after it was issued. The mediator studied the image, his expression unchanging. I watched Denise's face, the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, the way her fingers pressed white against her palms. Exhibit C. Withdrawal records showing $2,100 removed in cash the following day. And Exhibit D. A Venmo payment in the identical amount to Gavin Marshall, accompanied by a house emoji. Her attorney whispered something else to her, more urgently now. Denise shook her head once, sharply. "And finally," Casey said, her voice dropping slightly, "Exhibit E. Text messages between Mrs. Lowell and Mr. Marshall discussing the forgery and their plans to file false reports against my client." She placed the screenshots in a neat row. The messages looked stark and damning under the conference room lights. Signing his name was easy. "Once the TRO sticks, he's off base, and we own the house. He's too careful. We need to make him look dangerous." The silence in the room thickened. I remember the smell of fresh coffee from the carafe no one had touched, the slight scratch of the mediator's pen as he made notes. "Where is Mr. Marshall today?" the mediator asked, glancing at the empty chair. Denise's attorney cleared his throat. "We were informed late yesterday that Mr. Marshall would be unable to attend due to business commitments." "How convenient," Casey remarked. "Our motion also addresses Mr. Marshall's fraudulent harassment claim against my client. We have GPS data from Mr. Lowell's phone and security footage from his workplace, proving he was nowhere near the location where Mr. Marshall claimed to be threatened." The mediator nodded, reviewing the documents. "The harassment claim appears baseless on its face. I'll recommend immediate dismissal." Denise's posture changed then, a subtle slump of the shoulders, the first crack in her facade. Her attorney whispered to her again, and this time she nodded numbly. Casey continued, outlining our terms with surgical precision. "Given the documented financial fraud, marital misconduct, and attempted abuse of the legal system, we're requesting the following: full reimbursement of the $18,400 misappropriated funds, denial of all spousal support due to Mrs. Lowell's misconduct, exclusive possession of the marital home to Mr. Lowell, and a restraining order protecting both Mr. Lowell and the property from Mrs. Lowell and her associates, specifically including Gavin Marshall." I thought back to that night, walking into my own house to find strangers lounging on my furniture, the weeks of uncertainty that followed, the sleepless nights wondering if my career was over. And now, here we were. The truth laid bare under fluorescent lights. I looked directly at Denise, really looked at her. The woman I'd once planned a life with was a stranger to me now. "There's no path back from what you did," I said, my voice low but clear in the silent room. "Not to me. Not to this house. Not to my name." Denise finally met my eyes. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the person I'd once known. Not remorse, exactly, but recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by a cold resignation. The room remained frozen in the aftermath of my words. No one moved. The mediator glanced between us, pen poised over his legal pad. Casey sat perfectly still beside me, document folders arranged in meticulous order. And across the table, Denise and her attorney huddled in silent consultation, their options dwindling with each passing second. 1 week after the settlement conference, I stood at the back of the courtroom as the judge entered. The room had that particular courthouse smell, wood polish mixed with desperation. I straightened my tie, feeling the weight of anticipation in my chest. In the matter of Lowell versus Lowell, Judge Harmon began, adjusting her glasses. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I am prepared to issue my ruling. I glanced at Denise sitting at the far table. She wore a navy dress I'd never seen, her posture rigid, as the judge continued. This court finds overwhelming evidence of financial misconduct, including documented forgery, misappropriation of marital funds, and attempted abuse of the legal process. Judge Harmon's voice was firm, each word landing like a brick. The court therefore rules as follows. She looked up from her papers. First, exclusive possession of the marital residence at 2247 Westfield Lane is awarded to Raymond Lowell. Mrs. Lowell shall vacate the premises within 7 days and remove only her personal effects and premarital property. Casey squeezed my arm gently. The house was mine. Really mine. Second, given the documented misconduct, all requests for spousal support from Mrs. Lowell are denied. I watched Denise's shoulders tighten. Her attorney whispered something, but she didn't respond. Third, Mrs. Lowell is ordered to repay the sum of $18,400 misappropriated from joint accounts, with interest, according to the schedule outlined in Exhibit C. Failure to comply will result in contempt proceedings. Judge Harmon flipped to the next page. Fourth, this court grants the restraining orders protecting both Mr. Lowell and the property from Gavin Marshall, Dane Whitfield, Trent Wallace, and Omar Delgado. All named parties are to remain at least 500 feet from Mr. Lowell and the residence for a period of 3 years. I remembered the night they sat in my living room, smirking like they owned the place. Now they couldn't legally come within a city block of me. Finally, regarding the forged cashier's check and related financial fraud, this court is referring the matter to the district attorney's office with a strong recommendation for criminal prosecution. The judge looked directly at Denise. This court takes a dim view of attempts to manipulate the legal system through false claims and fraudulent documents. Judge Harmon signed the final order with a decisive stroke. This ruling is effective immediately. Court is adjourned. As we filed out, I caught Denise's eye for just a moment. Whatever she saw in my face made her look away first. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Captain Martinez in his office on base. The morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, highlighting the stack of papers on his desk, the finalized court orders, and the notice from the DA's office about Denise's plea deal. She'd accepted a lesser charge of misdemeanor forgery, but it still meant a permanent record, 6 months probation, and restitution payments. Well, Lowell, Rodriguez said, closing the file, I've reviewed everything here. Your temporary reinstatement is now permanent. Your record reflects good standing, and this incident will have no bearing on your future assignments or promotions. Thank you, sir, I said, relief washing through me. For what it's worth, he added, leaning back in his chair, you handled a difficult personal situation with discipline and integrity. That matters here. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for months finally lifted. That evening, I sat on my porch with Scout lying at my feet. The spring air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass from the neighbor's yard. I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. Denise collected her things today. Property transfer complete. I set the phone down and scratched behind Scout's ears. "Just us now, buddy," I murmured. The victory felt different than I'd expected. There was relief, yes, and vindication. The system had worked. The truth had prevailed. Yet, as I looked out at the darkening sky, I found myself wondering how Denise would cope now that every scheme had collapsed. The apartment near the highway she'd had to settle for, the friends who'd scattered once consequences appeared, the record that would follow her job applications. I didn't wish her well, exactly, but I didn't wish her worse, either. The truth had been punishment enough. It's been 6 months since the ruling. I never thought routine could feel this good, but every morning follows the same peaceful rhythm. I wake up before dawn, old military habits, and brew coffee in the kitchen that now has only my mugs in the cabinet. Scout pads over, his nails clicking against the hardwood, and waits by the back door. "Ready, buddy?" I ask, and he gives a single enthusiastic bark. We head out to the porch, where I've set up a comfortable chair facing east. Scout settles at my feet, and we watch the neighborhood wake up together. No tension in the air, no walking on eggshells, just the quiet and the sunrise, and the weight of Scout's head on my foot. Sometimes I think about how much I fought to keep this house. Not because of its market value or the equity we'd built, but because it was mine. The place I'd worked for through deployments and long hours. The place I'd come back to, expecting sanctuary. Ever wonder how quickly someone can reinvent themselves when they have to? Pretty damn fast, it turns out. Denise lives in a studio apartment off Highway 16 now. Casey told me it's month to month, no lease, the kind of place that advertises "no credit check" on sun-faded banners. 20% of her paycheck from the mall boutique where she works gets garnished and sent to me. Court-ordered restitution for the money she took. Eddie said she tried to get the garnishment reduced, claiming hardship, but the judge wasn't moved. The plea deal she took for the forgery means she reports to a probation officer twice a month. "Your ex-wife is learning that actions have costs," Casey told me during our final meeting. Sometimes those costs come due all at once. As for her friends, their reckoning came in different forms. Gavin's company ran a standard background check during their annual compliance review. When the restraining order popped up, they called him in for a meeting that lasted exactly 17 minutes. Eddie has sources everywhere. He told me Gavin cleared out his desk that same afternoon. Turns out, financial firms don't like employees who generate paperwork with words like harassment and trespass attached to their names. "He's selling his Audi," Eddie mentioned the last time we spoke, downgrading to something more appropriate for his new circumstances. Dane, Trent, and Omar learned their lesson the hard way. 3 weeks after the restraining orders went into effect, they decided to test the boundaries, literally. Eddie's surveillance camera caught them driving past my house at 1 a.m., slowing down, then circling back. I called it in immediately. The responding officers found them parked 2 houses down. "We're just driving," Trent had argued. "Public street." But the restraining order specified 500 feet, and the officer's measuring wheel proved they were well within that radius. All 3 spent the night in county lockup. They haven't come within a mile of my place since. I look at Scout now, gray around his muzzle, loyal to the core. He stayed with me through everything, my one constant. "Good choices, buddy," I tell him, scratching behind his ears. He leans into my hand, eyes closing in contentment. That night in my living room feels like another lifetime. The shock, the betrayal, the moment when everything I thought was solid turned to sand. But I never had to become someone I didn't recognize to win this fight. I never had to scream or break things or make threats. I just had to be undeniable. If you're sitting there now, feeling the aftershocks of someone's betrayal, wondering if there's a way through that doesn't destroy you in the process, there is. The loudest response to betrayal isn't rage. It's calm, methodical truth. It's standing in a courtroom with evidence while they stand with excuses. You know what true revenge looks like? This. My mornings with coffee and my dog. My evenings with books I want to read and shows I want to watch. The absence of chaos, the presence of choice. When people ask if I'm bitter, I tell them no. Bitterness requires energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. I'm not angry anymore. I'm done. My peaceful life now speaks volumes more than their betrayal ever did. In the end, that's the victory no one can take from me. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.